Hello, everyone. This is Catherine Baer with River Network, and thanks for joining us today. Close to 2:30, and we got people coming in, so we're going to let people keep on coming in to probably 2:30 or a minute or two after, and then we will get started. Thank you. This is Catherine Baer with River Network, and it's 2:30, and we're going to give it just a minute more to let a few more folks get in the room, and then we will get started there right away. And go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. This is Catherine Baer. I am Director of Science and Policy at River Network, and I'm joining you today from my home office in North Carolina. So thanks so much to all of you for joining us on this really great webinar. So before we get started with our topic for the day, Drinking Water 101B, a few items just to note for you. First of all, everyone is in listen-only mode, so you can use the chat box for questions. We will be watching that during the webinar and letting Maria, our presenter today, take those questions at her sort of pauses that she's built into her presentation. So we will keep an eye on those. You also, at the end of this webinar, will get a survey, and we'd love it if you would fill that out and give us some feedback on how to improve this webinar experience for you. Okay, hold on. Move this window away from the shared application. All right. Hold on. Brian, I'm getting a pause on screen sharing.
Maybe we can switch the presenter over to Maria.
I'm sure that sounds fine.
Hold on. Let's see. It says pause. It says move this window away from the shared application. Not sure how to do that. Okay. Can you see it nice now?
Try it one more time and share your screen.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. I think that looks like it's working. Hopefully everyone can see that. Sorry about little technical. So, so it sounds like, so River Network, as for anyone who doesn't know us already, for 30 years now, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary. River Network has filled a unique niche in the environmental community by focusing primarily on the 2,000-plus river and watershed organizations that work at the local and state levels. But we also engage with a much broader community to support healthy rivers and water resources. And today, our focus at River Network is further structured into a couple strategic areas, including clean water, ample water, and supporting strong water champions. We then align our expertise in science, policy, and organizational development and our community engagement efforts in these areas for greatest impact. And we provide our community and anyone with curiosity, really, access to knowledge and effective strategies related to clean water and ample water and supporting strong organizations, individuals, and coalitions. Through our website, annual conference River Rally, publications, webinars like these, and access to a network of both peers and experts and other resources, as well as direct consultation we provide, we help individuals, groups, and coalitions become more effective champions for our waters. So that's sort of in a nutshell is who we are. And I know a lot of you are members already, so thank you so much for joining us and supporting us. We have a open level membership that's open to anyone, where you receive our newsletter and other information. If you want to join as a premium member, you get a paid member, you get access to premium trainings and webinars like our Leadership Development Institute. You can also help find you funding for water projects through our Business for Water Stewardship Project and Rain Barrel work. You'll also receive 25% off registration for our upcoming annual River Rally Conference. This is coming up at the end of the month, so it's a good time to join, and you also receive discounts on consultation. So I hope you will consider joining us at River Rally, which is a fabulous conference, 400 to 500 river advocates coming together, networking, and learning about all sorts of topics. So we hope you'll see there. There's also volunteer discounts this year, so follow up with us if you're interested. Now, today's topic is, of course, about drinking water. So I just wanted to pause for a second and talk a little bit about how we came to this topic, because River Network is a relatively new area for us to jump into. And we heard from our network based on what was happening in the world with more drinking water issues emerging, affecting people in the communities where our members and our community works. We realized it was a really critical issue for us to address. And many people like us had started working really more closely on clean water issues, but didn't know that much about drinking water. So we started working on, we're trying to help think about drinking water, how people can learn more, how to build capacity in this area. So we're doing that in a couple of ways right now. First is a series of webinars providing some 101 information. Secondly, we are developing a drinking water toolkit, and this is going to be a resource that will be available to anyone and will hopefully provide that entry level into what can I actually do in my community, how do I understand the laws, funding, rate structures, and how do I work on drinking water. That's a work in progress, so if you have ideas about how we should structure that or resources we should include, please contact me. My contact information will be at the end of the webinar. And then finally, I just want to mention that we are supporting what we're calling a drinking water peer learning cohort, which will be 5 to 7 organizations around the country who will work together over the course of 18 months to learn each other. I'm getting some background noise. From learning and extras, and we'll get support to attend 2 in-person meetings together. So to apply for that, you can see the link at the bottom, rivernetwork.org and Strong Champions Drinking Water Cohort. Those are due towards the end of this month, and so we hope you will consider applying to join us in that cohort. So I want to turn it over to Maria Lopez-Carbo, who is our presenter today. And this, as you know, is the second of 2 webinars. The first one was last week, and Maria, and that one covered some of the basics of what a drinking water system is, how it works, some of the basics of how you look up some of the compliance data and sort of the differences in sizes and source water protection. Today, she's going to cover Safe Drinking Water Act, standards, how they get established, implemented, and compliance around them. She's also going to touch on infrastructure funding. And Maria's also built in a lot of time for Q&A, so we'll make sure to try to get to as many questions as we can. So let me introduce Maria. She is currently the Acting Division Director for the Standards and Risk Management Division in the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water. This division is responsible for promulgating national primary drinking water regulations, which we were talking about. She's got extensive experience working collaboratively with states, tribes, and many water sector stakeholders to implement and provide oversight of federal drinking water regulations. Prior to joining the Office of Water, Maria worked with the Office of Air and Radiation, certifying off-road diesel engines. And prior to joining EPA, Maria worked at a 65 million gallon a day wastewater treatment plant that serves Fairfax County and designed stormwater detention ponds. Maria has a BS in Civil Engineering from Virginia Tech and a Master's in Science and Environmental Engineering from Johns Hopkins University. So thank you, Maria, so much for your time and joining us, and let me turn it over to you.
Sounds great, Catherine. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to join you today from Washington, D.C. Weather is a little crazy over here, so hopefully you all having a better weather than we are. And let me go ahead and put our presentation in presentation mode quickly. There we go. So just as Catherine said, we did one last week, and we talked a little bit about data and a lot about where you can get access to some of the information. I think my goal for these webinars is to give you a glimpse as to what the program does, but understanding it's kind of a big program, and it's hard to just get all these concepts and just everything that's going on. So I also wanted to provide a lot of website links where you guys can go back afterwards and say, oh, I want to follow up on this particular program or this particular aspect or this particular contaminant. And so I wanted to make sure that you guys had access to that. And so I'm doing that again today. I agree with Catherine. I think the success of last week was just all of the amazing, great questions that you all submitted. So hopefully this is also another great talkative group that will be submitting Q&As, because I think, the webinar today is for you. So feel free to kind of suggest those questions, send them in, and I will try to modify the presentation and make sure that it's addressing your questions. So with that said, today's a little bit different because today it sounded like you all wanted to hear about the history of the Safe Drinking Water Act and a little bit about how EPA goes about creating the National Primary Drinking Water Regulations. The Safe Drinking Water Act sets up a framework for us, and that's what we follow to publish these drinking water regulations. In addition to that, I also want to touch base on the other programs that SIDWA creates, such as the UIC, which is the Underground Injection Control Program, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which is an infrastructure program, as well as EPA's role in oversight of the states when it comes to implementing drinking water regulations. So let's get started. I have to admit, I hate seeing like PowerPoint slides that have this much information. But because it was the history and purpose of Safe Drinking Water Act, I figure I would add all the bullets in. But don't worry, I'm not going to make you read them. It's hopefully for your reference. The Safe Drinking Water Act was passed in 1974, but it was amended in 86 and 96. And when you talk to drinking water folks, mostly what we quote is the 96 amendments, because that made really big, significant changes to the law, and it's what you hear about today. As I mentioned last time, the Safe Drinking Water Act does not regulate private wells. So if you are a single-family homeowner and you have your own well, as well as your own maybe septic tank, EPA does not regulate that private well that provides drinking water to you. That doesn't mean that the states don't. It's just at the federal level, and under the Safe Drinking Water Act, we regulate public water systems, and you have to meet the definition of a public water system in order to have to comply with the National Primary Drinking Water Regulations. If you have any questions regarding how it applies in your state, always make sure to look at your state's regs, because they could have some tougher regulations or regulate private wells down to, 5 individuals are being served by that well. So it's really important to bring that up. We do have a lot of information about private wells on our website, because obviously we get questions about it, and so we have recommendations on what to test for, how to go about it. But just for the goal today, we do not regulate them, which means we also do not provide funds to help with their infrastructure. Again, the Safe Drinking Water Act authorizes the agency to set national health-based standards for drinking water. Again, we do those for natural occurring and man-made contaminants that may be found in drinking water. And today I will go through a flow chart that shows all the different steps that we take in order to regulate contaminants. Currently, we regulate over 95 contaminants via our National Primary Drinking Water Regulations. Does EPA do this alone? No, not really. It's a very collaborative group. We work very closely with states and water systems. We know that the success of the program comes from that collaboration and interaction. And we have a concept called primacy agencies in the Safe Drinking Water Act, which I will go ahead and define. But primacy agencies is really the department or agency in the state that we have authorized to implement the Safe Drinking Water Act. So I mentioned earlier that the 96 amendments is really where we had the biggest change and impact when it came to the Safe Drinking Water Act. And that's because before that, SIDWA really concentrated on the finished water coming out of a treatment plant. So basically, you would monitor the effluent coming out of a drinking water plant, or the finished water, I should say, sorry. Effluents for wastewater for the most part. We would look at your finished drinking water, and we would test that water. What we realized is that really you needed to have a more holistic approach. And so you really needed to look at your source water protection. You also needed to look at your distribution system to see what was happening there. And that's when you see that growth of not just regulating what's at the treatment plant, but also at your source water and at your finished water. The 96 amendments also introduces the concept of operator training, as well as public information. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. There we go. So again, what are some of the really specific highlights? Consumer confidence reports. We talked a little bit about this during the last time, so I won't go into a lot of details unless we have a very completely different group. So if that's the case, please feel free to send a Q&A, and I will make sure to talk about consumer confidence reports again. But basically, these reports, which can also be called water quality reports, are published by all our community water systems on a yearly basis. And what it does is it provides information on the contaminants that were detected by that public water system. and possible health effects language as well, and how to protect yourself from them. So again, if you are working at the local level with a public water system and you want to talk to members of the community about their drinking water, pulling up that system's consumer confidence report is your best bet, because you will find out what type of treatment the system has, what is the source water that's providing the drinking water, as well as what were some contaminants that were detected. You know, did they detect nitrate, lead, arsenic, E. coli, and that'll be for a full year. These reports are published in July of every year and provide information about the previous year. So, for example, in July of 2018, the public water systems will be publishing data from the year 2017. Cost-benefit analysis. Before the 96 amendments, EPA had the authority to regulate. But what the 96 amendments introduced was the concept of cost-benefit analysis. So for every regulation that EPA puts out, a cost-benefit analysis must be made to determine whether the benefits of the drinking water standard that we're proposing justify the costs. So basically, we have to have a cost-benefit analysis in order to publish a regulation. The Drinking Water State Revolving Fund is formed at this point. And what is that? Why is that important? Why is that critical? Well, it's really a program that goes to the states, and it provides federal funding that is matched with state funding in order to make infrastructure or management improvements to help water systems assess and protect not only their source water, but also their finished water. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund later on in the presentation. Operator certification. SIDWA introduced the concept that EPA had to issue guidelines that apply to state operator certification programs. All state programs must then report to EPA how they are going about to implement the program to make sure that it follows the intent of the law. This program is tied to Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and what that means is that if a state does not, they may decide we are not going to implement an operator certification program for drinking water systems, then the agency actually would not provide them the full allocation for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. So again, the state operator certification program, or the effective implementation of it, is linked to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. So again, this is kind of a quick framework and what the main difference was for the 96, which is source to tab. So again, before that, we usually would just regulate treatment technologies and finished drinking water at the facility. What the 96 amendments did was, hey, we need to protect the sources of water as well, because if we don't put things in there, then it might be easier for the treatment plant to take it out. So a lot of SIDWA introduced the concept of source water protection. It also made EPA aware that we needed to start monitoring for compliance in the distribution system, and also increase public awareness. And that's where the Consumer Confidence Report, which I just mentioned earlier, really comes into play. Again, going back to that public information and consultation, SIDWA also emphasized that consumers have the right to know what is in their drinking water. And so therefore, EPA had to come up with the Consumer Confidence Report, which is reported annually, but it's also linked to Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 notifications. And those are the types of notifications that a community water system must put out based on a regulation and what is happening. So a Tier 1 is usually done for an E. coli hit, for example, and that basically means that that contaminant has acute and immediate public health impact, and so it must be done within 24 hours. So those are our Tier 1s. Our Tier 3s are usually allocated for example, a system forgot to monitor for a particular contaminant. And so they must announce that as a Tier 3, which does have up to a year to be announced. In addition to that, 96 amendments put a really big focus on small water systems. Last time we talked about the fact that we have about 152,000 public water systems in this country, and that the majority of them are small. EPA has three main categories of small systems, and they are done by how many people they serve. So we consider a small system one that's serving less than 10,000, but we do break them down between systems that serve less than 500 and less than 3,300. And the reason for that is that those three small categories of systems face different challenges. And so we could do a webinar just on that. But one thing that the SIDWA amendments brought up was the fact that small water systems do have technical, managerial, and financial capacity issues, and that EPA and the states had to work together to build that capacity, because you could have a brand new built, beautiful infrastructure, public water system, but if you don't have the right people to run it, if you don't have certified operators, knowledgeable engineers, you could really run that infrastructure to the ground. And it's a big financial investment, and for the most part, it was made by the federal government. So part of this was to protect that federal investment in that infrastructure. And last but not least is the source water assessment programs. And I know a lot of you are very much aware, actually, of our source water initiative, so I won't dwell too much on this. But basically, every state had to conduct an assessment of its sources of drinking water, and what were some of those potential sources of contamination, and how susceptible were they, and would they be able to address the situation if it happened. So if they had gasoline tanks near their source, any type of industry that could leak into that source, how were they preparing for it? So again, this is just a quick overview that we normally use for SIDWA. And again, what is it that EPA does under SIDWA? EPA is responsible for partnering with the states and public water systems to ensure that they're implementing our regulations. We provide funding to invest in drinking water infrastructure in this country, and we do that through the State Drinking Water SRF. And recently, we started working on WIFIA, which is a new infrastructure funding program. So right now we have two. We set national drinking water standards. We oversee the disposal of waste through the UIC program. And UIC is our underground injection control program, where there are 6 types of wells in which the permittee is allowed to inject certain types of waste underground. And of course, you probably have heard about after 9/11, we did form the Water Security Division, which really works at the national security level and works with the Department of Homeland Security on issues related to security and resiliency. And resiliency really goes to when we have some type of natural event, and how do we bounce back from that. And actually, most recently, we had 3 major hurricanes hit our country within weeks. We had Texas and Florida, and then in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So that division has been very busy setting up EOCs and helping these systems recover. So again, just real quick, some of the things that SIDWA includes, only because for the most part, people think of SIDWA for the drinking water regulations, but in reality, SIDWA does create the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, the Source Water Protection Program, as well as the Underground Injection Control Program. So I'll get into more details into it further down, but I mentioned the concept of primacy, which is embedded in the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is when the EPA grants the authority for a state to run the program for EPA after a few reviews of the program and making sure that they are as stringent as EPA would be. Every state has primacy agency in our country, except for Wyoming and the District of Columbia. So just to kind of talk a little bit about this concept of primacy, because we get a lot of questions about it. What does it mean to have primacy? Basically, EPA is the one that establishes maximum contaminant levels or treatment techniques, as well as monitoring and reporting requirements. And those requirements are for public water systems. And we are the ones that set those through our national primary drinking water regulations. So those are the things that at a minimum, public water systems must comply with. However, a state is allowed to be more stringent than EPA, and so therefore a state might promulgate more regulations. What does it mean when EPA delegates primacy? And really what we're doing is we are also delegating enforcement responsibility. It basically means that the state is allowed to implement the national primary drinking water regulations after we have looked at what they have. Again, we have 57 primacy agencies, 49 states, 6 territories, and the Navajo Nation. Now, the Navajo Nation is the only tribe in our country that has primacy. They serve about 141 community water systems with 160,000 people. The rest of the tribal lands, EPA has the responsibility to implement the program. And so EPA directly implements the program in about 736 community water systems in this country, serving over 1 million people. Our Region 8 office also works very closely with Wyoming because, as I said earlier, they do not have primacy. And they have about 321 community water systems serving over 477,000 people. Then we have the District of Columbia. Again, we also implement that, but there's only about 5 community water systems serving 665,000 people. And what I'm showing you is a map of the U.S. with our regional offices. And so those are the regional offices that would work very closely with those states to make sure that the regulations are being implemented, provide the oversight, not only on compliance, but also some of the funding that we provide for them in order to implement the program. So with that,
we have one question.
Hi, Catherine.
We've got one question on the state revolving loan fund, but I'm thinking maybe we wait to answer that till we get down to talking about the state revolving loan fund.
I'll leave it up to you. I can do it now or later.
Yeah, so whatever makes the most sense, maybe we focus on. Are there any questions from anyone about, okay, so we've got one, let's see. There's a major development happening where a large industry has chosen a manufacturing site based on availability of clean water from an aquifer. How can local citizens and organizations follow a situation like this to see how well the company and local agencies are following the rules for siting, water extraction, and regulatory compliance? I don't know if that fits within the scope or not.
So that was a pretty long question. I'm going to guess this is more under the underground UIC. Do you mind repeating it again, or maybe copy-pasting it to me so I can read it? I'm pretty sure this is an underground injection control program. It sounds like maybe there's a company that is getting ready to inject some waste. Is that what that question is saying?
Sounds like they're actually extracting water. It doesn't say whether they're going to be injecting or not. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, it was a long one, so I have to kind of repeat it. So there's a major development happening. A large industry has chosen a site for manufacturing. Okay, so it just came through. Based on a large quantity of clean water available from okay, so this is actually getting water from an aquifer. How can local citizens and organizations follow a situation like this to see how well company and local agencies are? Okay, so this is a little bit outside of SIDWA, out of the Safe Drinking Water Act, unless it's a protected aquifer, which then falls under the underground injection control program. These permits are probably coming out of the state. So actually, I would go to the state clean water side and ask about who is running this permit and who has to approve it, and I think that would be your best bet. There has to be public meetings in order to approve them, and so they should be able to give you that particular information so that you can follow them. Again, not knowing where it is in the country, it limits me in terms of who runs the program and what information I can provide.
Okay, and we can also do some follow-up email afterwards, yeah. On source water assessments, do states pass the assessment, actual assessment responsibility to the water utilities and then review and approve? What's the process on the source water assessments?
So the source water assessments under the Safe Drinking Water Act, EPA had the authority to ask the state to implement the program, provide some guidelines, and then the states were only asked to do the source water assessment once. But all public water systems have to have it. So you will find, and actually we had a recent event in West Virginia, and we asked for the source water assessments from them, and they were all, I would say, 20 years old. But the funny part is they actually had identified the contaminants or the vulnerabilities, and this was where the situation was, and so we were able to use the information. So the way it worked was the system had to do it once, the state approved it or reviewed it. They didn't really approve it. They reviewed it to make sure it had elements. There was not an actual approval process, just a review process. But the SIDWA did not provide an authority to X amount of years, the system has to go back and look at it. Some states did do that, though. And so some states you will see that have some type of mandate for the public water system to review them again and, update them. Unfortunately, SIDWA did not.
I got a question, too, about speaking more about the drinking water toolkit that River Network is trying to develop. And I can talk about it more in the presentation, but this is a toolkit that we at River Network are trying to develop that would help citizens and community and watershed organizations to have a place to go where a lot of these resources on drinking water and how you engage members of your community, how you understand how the rules and laws and funding work would be in one place. So it'll be sort of like if I'm concerned about, source water assessments and understanding source water, it would take you to one part of the toolkit and provide resources and case studies. So it will be an online tool primarily that we're sort of testing out this summer and fall. So that's the answer to that question. Returning quickly to the question about the industrial plant, it was in Indiana, and I think Lisa actually, your question is about water withdrawals, which is regulated at the state level. So the withdrawal process would be governed by Indiana permitting, and water withdrawal procedures vary greatly in each state. So I'm not familiar with Indiana's. I know here in the Southeast we have very limited, regulations for water withdrawal. So hopefully you have more in Indiana. Okay, Maria, let's take one more question here before we keep going. How about so here's one, underground injection. My understanding, someone writes, is that many of the wastewater injection well owners and the California State Agency has petitioned EPA to downgrade high-quality aquifers successfully. We are concerned about losing these source waters while facing repeated and longer droughts that require to maximize the use of our aquifers.
So it sounds like that's a statement, I think, about a concern about how California is implementing I can't remember which class well, those wastewater injection wells, and about, obviously California has been facing a drought, and so how those are being used. And so I understand, yes, California has been facing, incredible droughts. It's, the agricultural center of our country. And so that impacts as well the quality of the water that they do have, and then you have a drought on top of that. So I understand that it sounds like this is a concern about how it's being implemented. I guess there's not an actual question, but I guess one thing that you could do is work with the EPA Region 9 office in San Francisco. They work closely with the state of California to implement the UIC program, or the Underground Injection Control Program. And so they might be able to provide a little bit more information on this.
Okay.
And then, Catherine, do you want to take the last one about the state revolving fund, because that's actually pretty fast as well. So it says, can the state revolving fund be used to replace lead water lines, even those from systems to house, which may be considered as private? So the quick answer there is the state revolving fund may be used to fund lead service lines. That's what we should refer to those as lead service lines, up to the meter. And in some cases, the meter is located in a basement of a house. EPA recently put out a memo clarifying this, but I do want to remind everybody that the funds go to a public water system. The state revolving fund is not funds for a private homeowner, but to a public water system. So the public water system comes in and asks for a loan, and as part of the loan, they have these lead service lines, and they go all the way to the meter, and they cover the lead service line. The funds are eligible. But a homeowner cannot come and ask EPA for SRF funds because those funds, again, go to a public water system.
Is that, Maria, and to clarify, can the public water system decide to grant some of their money that they've gotten in a loan to homeowners if they choose to, or are they limited to re-granting it as well?
No, the money goes to them. If there's another type of legal accordance on the funding, then that has to be done on the other side. EPA would not be involved. But who EPA is going to have as a loan will be the public water system.
Right, but the loan from EPA to the public water system does not prevent the public water system from then giving money to homeowners if that's a priority for them.
That changes by state because that's a different type of loan.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we can say is we are allowed to give a loan to the public water system. The loan is eligible to cover lead service lines, but a homeowner cannot come to EPA and ask for funds.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So Catherine talked to me a little bit about how everybody was interested in how the Safe Drinking Water Act gives EPA a framework to develop a national primary drinking water regulation. And so what you see in front of you right now is a flow chart. And so what I am trying to convey, and it might look a little complicated, but it really isn't once we go through it, is this is, in fact, the framework that the Safe Drinking Water Act gives to EPA in order to propose and finalize a national primary drinking water regulation. So let's start over here on the left with a yellow box that says Draft CCL. And what CCL stands for is a Contaminant Candidate List. A Contaminant Candidate List is exactly what the name says. It's a list of contaminants that EPA has gone out to the water sector, universities, basically academia, experts in the field, just basically anybody involved in drinking water. We also look at pesticides and that side of the industry to say, hey, what are some contaminants that are out there that you think are present in drinking water? And so EPA develops this list with help of the public. We create a draft of this list and show it to the public and say, hey, this is what we think. Do you have any other suggestions? And that's an excellent time for people to come in and give us ideas. And once we look at that draft, we publish a final contaminant candidate list. Again, this is just a list of potential contaminants that could be in our finished water. And they go through public review. That particular contaminant candidate list, which is those boxes in yellow, help EPA form the UCMR, and UCMR stands for Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. And what does that mean? That is when EPA goes out and monitors for contaminants that are currently not regulated by us, but we want to see what the presence is in the field. So we look at the contaminant candidate list, we talk to our stakeholders as well, and then we publish, first in draft form and then in final form, the unregulated contaminant list, unregulated monitoring reporting rule, and that is the 30 contaminants are identified, and we will go into the field and monitor for them. Again, these are all contaminants that have not been regulated by EPA, and what EPA is trying to do is find its occurrence in the country. The SIDWA framework is very much established between, what are some contaminants that have, big health effects, but also combined with what is the presence in this country. Because if we have a contaminant that's highly toxic, but it's not really found in our drinking water, then, we'd rather go find another contaminant that maybe it's not as high in health impacts, but is very present in our drinking water. So as you can see, the arrows in the CCL and in the UCMR kind of flow back with each other. These two kind of work together a little bit to see what happens. And then once we have the results from the UCMR, they move over to this blue box, right, which is the preliminary regulatory determinations. That preliminary regulatory determination is when the agency looks at the CCL, contaminant CCL, but that's the contaminant candidate list, and the UCMR, which is the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, and we see here's this contaminant, it has these health effects, But then, and here is the precedents that we're seeing in this country. And we determine, okay, are these worth exploring more to see if they need to be regulated? And so the agency publishes the preliminary regulatory determination. We get feedback from the public, and then we finalize the regulatory determinations. Now, we usually pick 5 contaminants to analyze. If we have negative determinations for those 5, it means that we are, at this time, the agency is not taking steps to regulate that contaminant. If we make a positive determination, then we move over to the little green box over here, and that's when we start working on a proposed rule. And again, some of the things that we're looking for are the health effects and the presence in finished water and in the drinking water, sorry. Once we propose the rule, again, we have to get public comment, and then we do the final rule, and we have 18 months to do that. So those are these green boxes here. And then once we have a final National Primary Drinking Water Rule, those rules have to be reviewed every 6 years to make sure that either is there new information on health effects, is there new information on technologies, what has changed, is this rule effective as it is? And if it's not, how to revise it. So most recently, the Total Coliform Rule, which is a rule that applies to all public water systems, that regulation went through the 6-year review. The agency made determinations that it didn't want to, in fact, change it. And so it got reproposed and finalized again. And so currently we are implementing a revised Total Coliform Rule. So that's one rule that was picked up from there. It's also important to note that the agency has only made one positive regulatory determination in terms of making it a final National Primary Drinking Water Regulations, and I'll get into that as well. But we do regulate over 95 contaminants, and the majority of those were identified by Congress. So again, our next slides are gonna go into each of these, but again, if you wanted to think about it real quick, basically, EPA generates a list of potential contaminants, then we monitor for a subset of those to see if they're present in the country. Then we combine what we know about this list, what we know about the monitoring results, what we know about the presence in the field, and what we know about health effects, and we decide if we're going to do a regulatory determination, which are the blue boxes. We have public interaction there as well to make sure, and we make them final. And then if we make positive determinations, that's when we actually create the regulations. And again, you will have a chance to talk about, for the public to give us comments. All these green stars that you see here, 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 and here, that's when we get public review and comment.
And Maria, if someone wants to take part in that public comment process, like on the draft candidate contaminant list, how do you know about that? Is there a place you sign up on the EPA website or find out about that, or is it would it be?
Yes, all these steps are published in the Federal Register notice. But I'm also going to go through our website so you can also see when we've put them up. But all these actions with the stars here, they all require a federal regulatory notice. Okay, so the next slides are all going to go into those little boxes that we just talked about. So here's the CCL4, or the 4th contaminant candidate list. So we have published basically 4 rounds of the contaminant candidate list, and the last one was published on November 17 of 2016. The list includes 97 chemicals and 12 microbial contaminants. And I've put the website up on the slides, so in case you want to go and look at more information. And so what are our next steps? We will continue to compile and evaluate additional data on the CCL4 contaminants. So we keep this on the list. We look for new research, new information on them. We will make a regulatory determination if there is sufficient health effects and occurrence data, and again, combined with public health concern regarding these contaminants. And we just continue to collect information on them. Is there new research, information gaps? We publish them, but we continue to try to compile that data. And again, if you go to our website here, and again, we have a pretty long website link, which is why I put it embedded in the PowerPoint. But you can visit this website and find more information. These are the list of the 97 chemicals and 12 microbes that we have. Some of these have been pretty much in the press. So, for example, 1,4-dioxane. I know there's some sites in North Carolina that people are very concerned about. You will see that we have Legionella. I'm sure you also heard about the concerns we've had with Legionella, both in the VA hospitals. Disneyland in California had a recent hit on Legionella as well. PFOS and PFOA are on this list. The nitrosamines, which are here, have also been on that list. So some of these you'll probably recognize because they've been on the press. From formaldehyde is right here. And a few that you might not have heard about as well are in here. So this is kind of what the list looks like. Okay, so now moving on to the unregulated contaminant monitoring list. And again, this is when EPA looks at CCL, talks to our experts and decides to go ahead and monitor for 30 contaminants. We are on our 4th version of this regulation or of this effort. It was published December of 2016. The reason there are 30 contaminants is because that's actually what the Safe Drinking Water Act states. So the Safe Drinking Water the SIDWA, or Safe Drinking Water Act, basically tells the EPA that you will monitor for 30 contaminants. And so for this UCMR4, or our 4th version of the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, we are monitoring for 10 cyanotoxins, 3 disinfection byproduct groups, 9 pesticides, 2 metals, 3 alcohols, and 3 COCs. How does this work? All large water systems have to monitor for these. There will be a small group of small systems that will be required to monitor. EPA will pay for that. They'll collect the sample, but we will pay for the analysis of the sample. All this information will be put up on our website. And actually, I was going to take a quick detour. I guess I'm not allowed to do a quick detour because my computer's not letting me detour. I was going to take you all to there we go, to the UCMR4 website. And in the UCMR website, you will find this fancy little fact sheet that has all the information, as well as details about the contaminants that we are monitoring for. And so here's the 10 cyanotoxins and then the additional contaminants. It will tell you which systems are monitoring for what, and it's based on their size. And so this could be something that could help you if you're ever getting questions about UCMR. This information has to be published in the Consumer Confidence Report, like we mentioned earlier, which is that whole annual report that goes out. And we will also be publishing it in the National Contaminant Occurrence Database. That is basically the public version of the database that will show you where we monitored and what we detected. So just wanted to show you that, so in the future you'll be able to also get your own information. The monitoring started this year, January of 2018, and so we expect that the first group of monitoring results will be published probably around the fall of this year, because it takes it's almost like a quarter to get all the data in, make sure all the QA/QC was done, and then publish it. So here are the 30 contaminants again. They can also be found on our website. But in case you were interested, we have microsystems by ELISA method, which, as you know, that has a lot to do with our harmful algal blooms, which has been a big issue the last few years. But also all the other ones that we're looking for. And we have 9 pesticides this year, so it'll be interesting to see what we find. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about that contaminant candidate list, which again is just a list of all these contaminants that could potentially be in our drinking water. But then we also talked about the UCMR, or the unregulated contaminant list. I'm reporting unregulated. I use the acronym so often I never say them out loud. Unregulated contaminant monitoring as well. So once we look at that list and that monitoring, we go into the regulatory determination phase, and that's when we look, again, What are the health effects? What is the data we have? What is the research we have? Do we want to do a positive determination for any of these regulations? And so for Reg Det 3, which is published in October of 2014, we made 4 negative determinations and 1 positive determination for strontium. We then published a final Reg Det 3 in January of 2016, where we continued to keep our opinion that we were going to have 4 negative determinations, but we delayed our determination for strontium, and it's because we did not have enough, we needed to get more health studies related to the exposure of strontium, and we wanted to do more testing on treatment technologies for strontium. So this will then mean that we will then publish our final Reg Det 4 for January of 2021. So the 6-year review, again, we talked a little bit about the fact that once we do make a determination, once we do publish a National Primary Drinking Water Regulation, we then have to do a 6-year review. So currently we are on our 3rd 6-year review. It was published January of 2017. It is the first time that this review finds that there are areas to enhance the microbial and disinfection byproducts regulations. So they reviewed 76 of our National Primary Drinking Water Regulations and determined that 8 of them were candidates for revision. And so those are our Stage 1, Stage 2, Surface Water Treatment Rule, LT1, LT2. Again, we have to review it every 6 years, and if you want more information, you can visit our website. And again, the whole point of this is that we're looking at the rule to see how we can enhance it. And during our last one, it looks like we'll be looking at our microbial and disinfection byproduct regs. Perchlorate. So just a real quick drill on perchlorate. Perchlorate was the first time that the agency actually made a positive determination using this framework that we're defining. Perchlorate basically can interfere with our thyroids and impair some of its function. Based on our SIDWA framework, EPA requested that our Science Advisory Board take a look at what we were proposing for our maximum contaminant level goal for perchlorate. And in 2013, the Science Advisory Board recommended that we use what is called a PBK model. And it's basically a model that looks at sensitive life stages. It is a different model than what we've used in the past to do our regulations. And actually, at the time of this recommendation, the model had not been finalized or gone through peer review. So the agency collaborated with USDA Food and Drug Administration to take a look at these recommendations regarding the data collection and the review. We have gone through several peer reviews for perchlorate. And now what we're doing is we're seeking independent review of this scientific analysis for potential health effects on perchlorate, because we need that information really to make sure that we are able to publish the regulation. If you're interested on more information about this PBK model, I've put in the link to that website. We also had another peer review earlier in January, because we're already in May, to basically review our approach to derivation of the MCLD, which we need in order to establish an MCL. However, because we were going to use a new model and we needed all this peer review, we did miss our deadline to basically propose and finalize a regulation for perchlorate. So currently, EPA is under consent decree to develop a proposed drinking water regulation for perchlorate by October of 2018, and to promulgate a regulation by December of 2019. So right now we are, again, finalizing our peer reviews, assessing our cost benefits, which, as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the 96 amendments. We do have to do a cost benefit when we're looking at a regulation. And so once we have all that information, hopefully we'll be able to propose. Real quickly, I'm just looking at time, so I better speed it up a little bit. We are also working on what is called the lead-free rule. This is really quick. Basically, Congress had passed a law that basically defined what lead-free was. but lead-free was defined as 8% of the components could still have lead in it. So lead-free was defined as it can have more than 8% lead in a drinking water component. However, in January 17 of 20, no, that's not the day it came out. That's when we proposed the rule. In 2014, Congress changed the law and changed that lead-free number from 8% to 0.25%. So it was a big reduction. So again, we still have lead in the wetted perimeters, but it's not at 8%, it's a lot less. And so basically EPA has to go ahead and codify this because it was made in the SIDWA. We had to codify it in one of our rules. And so we were able to propose in January 17 of 2017, which was followed by a comment period, which ended on May of 2017. And again, what we're trying to do is not only codify that definition of lead-free, so that changed from 8% to the 0.25%, but also propose some requirements so people know which products are made with lead-free. Because if you're using certain products for stormwater or wastewater, they don't need to be lead-free because people won't be drinking from them. But if they're for drinking water, we want to make sure that people and the plumbers are able to see clear labels about the products. And so we want to propose labeling of these products and packaging, so it could be very easily indicated to the plumber, hey, these are lead-free, this is what you use for drinking water. Certification requirements as well as exemptions, because that was not clear from what we had, so we want to do some exemptions for lead-free requirements. And again, proposing label requirements for manufacturers that establish some of these products. So one of the regulations that EPA is strongly working on is the lead and copper rule. I'm sure you've heard about it. The lead and copper rule covers about 68,000 drinking water systems in this country. Lead is a tricky one. We know that lead exposure has significant impact to our children and their health. That's why the maximum contaminant, the MCLG, which is a maximum contaminant level goal, is equal to 0. And what that number means is that we are not aware of a level that does not produce some type of health effect. So that's why MCLG equals 0 for this rule. The lead and copper rule is the only rule where EPA monitors at the tap or at the home. Most of our other sampling is either at the treatment facility or in the distribution system. However, because of the different sources of lead, and that's what I want to do with this little diagram here, earlier we talked a little bit about the lead service line, which is right here. I'm trying to use my mouse to show you. This not only does it include that lateral, which could be a lead service line, it could also be a gooseneck that's found there, which I don't have a picture of a gooseneck, but it's usually a piece of pipe that will go over here, or it could leach lead. But there's other sources. There's water meters, the valves, the galvanized iron, the solders, the water fountain, which we talk about in schools, as well as within the home, the premise plumbing. And so this is something that where EPA is working very closely to enhance this regulation. We did do the short-term revisions in 2006, and now we're working on the long-term revisions. The agency did request from our advisory group to provide some feedback on our key rule revision issues. In December of 2015, our advisory board provided the following recommendations, which were proactive lead service line replacement programs, more robust public education, making the corrosion control treatment requirements stronger for public water systems, monitoring requirements for consumer requested tap samples. So that's when the consumer calls the public water system and asks for a sample. There was a request to establish a health-based household action level, and that is because currently what the rule has is an action level for treatment. So that is, if your treatment is not able to produce this, then, we need you to change your corrosion control, but it wasn't based on exposure. So again, that number is based on treatment and not exposure, so that's why NITWAC or the advisory board requested a health-based action level. Again, also asking EPA to enhance their compliance and enforcement mechanisms for this regulation. For more information on the lead and copper rule, I've put our peer-reviewed draft of the model, and so you can click here and see what our model says regarding lead levels in drinking water, blood lead levels, particularly for sensitive stage lives, which is usually our infants and our children. And again, we continue to work on the possible revisions with LCR, with our state, with our local partners. We just had a federal engagement with them as well. So hopefully it's a regulation where we're doing a lot of work to make sure that it is enhanced. Algal toxins from harmful algal blooms. This is something that I think this group might be very interested in. We have had a lot of harmful algal bloom outbreaks in this country. In a few years ago, Toledo, Ohio actually had to shut down due to the concentration of harmful algal blooms in their source water, and their treatment plant was unable to treat it. And actually what we're showing you here is an aerial picture of their source water, and then this is actually their intake. And that's how the water looked. So this is something that EPA, although we do not regulate them, we realized that we needed to work with our states, and so we released an algal toxins health advisories and recommendation documents for both states and utilities to use in 2015. We are going to monitor for them in the UCMR 4, which again is that regulation where we go out and monitor for unregulated contaminants in the country. And so we have about 6,000 water systems that are going to be monitoring for this. In addition to that, we did release tools to assist states, tribes, and public water systems in managing cyanotoxins. We have management plan template, examples, plans, drinking water risk communication toolbox, treatment, and possible funding sources for cyanobacterial harmful algal blooms through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. We also developed and published improved analytical methods. And again, we basically continue to engage with the public as well as our Source Water Collaborative to get feedback from the materials that we're developing and how to kind of basically enhance it as we move forward on this. Oof, I'm over by 2 minutes, but we made it into the next Q&A.
That was a lot of good information you're covering. There's a lot to cover. All right, so why don't we start, with Paco's question there about, it's essentially the question of what's the criteria, a threshold from having a contaminant go from, where you're regulating it, you find it, what's the difference between a positive determination to move forward with the regulation versus a negative one?
Okay, so I think I understood it, but basically it's what is the difference when we decide to do a positive determination versus a negative determination. If we decide to make a positive determination, it means that at that time the agency had enough information regarding health effects and as well as occurrence in the country to move forward. If we made a negative determination, it means that either we didn't have enough information on health effects or we found very little occurrence. Now, one thing to point out is if we couldn't find that information now, that doesn't mean that we can never regulate it again. If something changes in the future and we have more information or the current increases in the country, we are able to go back to that. Does that help?
I think so, yeah. And then are the how much you find or the health effects, is that something that's in the Safe Drinking Water Act statute or regulations that determines that, or that's best scientific knowledge-based decision? So
I think you're asking me like in the UCMR, I'm sorry, can you repeat that one again?
So is it, you're saying, there's not enough data or you don't have enough information on health effects. How do you decide whether you have enough information on health effects?
That's based on the research that comes in. And so usually this is by our toxicologists or other research that has proof what the actual health effect is. So it's very technical information being shared and saying, this is what we're finding and this is how it is. That is not described in SIDWA. That is basically EPA takes the information, we analyze it, we put it out for public comment or peer, at times also peer review and then public comment. And then based on the public comment that we receive, we might either, change whatever decision we made, or we decide, oh, we got to look more into this. We didn't know about this particular document. And so we'll look into that before creating the final. So that's why we have a draft almost, a proposed, I should say, and a final. So that there we can make sure that we get as much information as possible.
Great, thank you. There was a question about perchlorate, and you covered a little bit, but let's do the follow-up here. So someone's asked that you did mention that EPA missed the line in assessing perchlorate, but it's now on track for 2019 finalization. Is there some way to fast-track this finalization for areas where perchlorate has been found in high concentrations?
So I think the question is, can we publish a regulation faster? I think, right? Yeah. Perchlorate is currently under consent decree, so the dates that I provided is what the law or what the court told us we have to do. So if EPA doesn't meet those dates, then we're in a lot of trouble. So that I think that's about what I can say. Those are kind of the dates we have right now. But no, the agency doesn't have a way of accelerating a regulation. However, if you know that there's a state that's having perchlorate issues, what you can do is talk to the primacy agency. The primacy agencies have authority within the local jurisdiction to take an enforcement action on a particular location, and maybe it's that they monitor for it or provide some type of extra treatment. If the state does not take an enforcement action and EPA feels that there has been imminent danger to a particular community, the Safe Drinking Water Act does let us take a 1431 or a 1414, which are enforcement actions. And that is when EPA basically, I don't want to say steps in, but I guess it is. If the state doesn't find imminent danger or decides not to create an enforcement, but EPA feels like we should, we do have that authority to understand what to do that enforcement action. And in that enforcement action, we can delineate some steps to take to remediate whatever is happening in that community.
Okay. So yeah. So on the whole, that's the answer to that. Okay. So coming back again, I think we've got to follow up on how do things actually get regulated. So the question is, does the level of health effects that trigger a positive finding rely on the precautionary principle or a higher burden of proof of health effects?
I'm so sorry. I'm so hard when it's reading it to me. Okay, so does the health effect that triggers a positive rely on a precautionary principle or a higher burden of proof of health effects?
Yeah.
You know, I'll be honest, I don't think I'm qualified to answer this. I'll be honest.
That's okay.
I can probably follow up. Yeah, I can probably follow up with someone that works very closely in this program. But, I mean, I guess I can try based on what I know. I mean, precautionary principle and then higher burden of proof, basically that we have to prove it. We don't necessarily need the higher burden of proof of health effects. We have, I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to get myself in trouble answering this one. I don't think that there's this higher burden of proof of health effects, I think, but we do want to see that it was studied and that we have some data to go on. So we want soundproof data and science before we make that determination, but it's also not something that is completely blown out of proportion either. So I can probably get you some of the individuals that work in that program to give you a more reliable answer.
That'd be great,
a more complete answer on that.
That's good, yeah. But we can get in touch with someone there, and we can follow up with Beth who asked this.
Yeah.
That'd be great. There's a question that came, going back to source water assessments, that came in through the chat box, and let me read it to you. I'm not sure if you can see it. Is how are source water protection assessments conducted across state lines, and what is EPA's role when the states differ significantly in their enforcement capacity or approach? For example, Maryland headwaters are in Virginia and Pennsylvania where fracking takes place, but Maryland has banned fracking, which takes place in Maryland. So how does that, is there a way that EPA comes to sort of harmonize and help protect states which are upstream and downstream of each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been one of the biggest issues with the underground injection control program. And so EPA regions do work with their states when it's going across state boundaries. It also happens, for example, in Texas and Oklahoma. It happened in Ohio. the UIC, unfortunately, the Underground Intrusion Control Program does not respect state boundaries. And so our EPA regional offices have worked with the states to try to come up with a collaborative effort. But it is a lot of collaboration because there's different agencies within the states that are also involved. But yes, we have done that in the past. Yeah.
So in a supportive role, not a regulatory role. Is that right?
Yes.
Someone asked a logistical question about the presentation. This we will be recording this presentation, and we recorded the last one, and they will be available online in coming weeks. So just so you know, there's a lot to take in. Okay, so let's see. I got a question. What's the expected time frame on issuing a draft lead and copper rule? What tools are there to help states and utilities address this? Does EPA plan to provide in the meantime, as you have done for the algal cyanotoxins?
So actually, EPA has been providing a lot of lead and copper implementation enhancements and oversight. We've actually conducted 20 face-to-face workshops across the country in the last 2 years, basically on corrosion control, water quality parameters, Tier 1 sampling, all different aspects of the regulation. In addition to the 20 face-to-face workshops that we have provided for states and utilities, we actually run every month a lead and copper webinar on basic requirements. We've also been doing oversight of the state program, where we go into the state program and we provide them with an assessment in terms of how they are implementing the lead and copper rule, what are some of the things that maybe are missing. Some of these corrosion control templates are actually up online, so you can, if you had to review or prepare a corrosion control study, we tell you what are some of the things that we're looking for, and give you the spreadsheets on how to do them as well. So I would say we definitely have been doing a lot of enhanced implementation on the lead and copper rule. I think on the cyanotoxins we've provided 6 workshops so far. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do more past May. But so those are 2 areas where we've been providing a lot of tools and just a lot of face-to-face.
Great. And here's a final one. I think you addressed this initially, but the question is,
yeah,
how does a member of the public get a certain contaminant onto the CCL list, the candidate contaminant list? Do you just send something in, or do you expect it to send in a lot of data? Sort of, what does that look like?
So it's our Federal Register notice, which is published in the FR. That's where you would go look for, and then once we publish them in the Federal Register, they're also put up on our website on a copy. Okay.
Thank you. And we will send links out as a follow-up on some of these sites for people to go to, so look for that as well. Okay, I think that's what we got right now.
Yay! So we got 15 minutes left, right? Okay, let's see how we do this. We can do this, definitely. So the next part of my presentation goes a little bit more, not so much into the public water systems themselves, although I'm going to give a quick overview of them because I think we covered it in the first one, but I figure we needed to cover it a little bit here. Again, with the public water systems, 90% of the American public depends on these systems. We talked a little bit about the different definitions of them, which we have community water systems, non-transient, non-community water systems, and transient. We have about 152,000 public water systems. The majority of them are small. However, the largest utilities serve the majority of the population, and that's where the smallest number in terms of inventory we have. So we have less large systems than small, but the large serve the majority of the population in this country. Again, we set legal limits for over 90 contaminants, and this includes arsenic, chemical contaminants, lead and copper, radionuclides, groundwater rules, stage 1, stage 2 disinfection byproducts, surface water, total coliform. We actually have an aircraft drinking water rule. Believe it or not, EPA does have a rule that regulates the water that is boarded into airplanes. And so we actually have a public interface where you can see, if JetBlue had any hits, if American Airlines had any hits, and that's also up on our public website. And of course, Consumer Confidence Report and public notification, which are our right-to-know regulations. Last webinar, we talked about our SIDWA Federal Reports and Advanced Search, and this is where you can find contaminants per area in the country, whether it's a monitoring reporting, whether you want to know if there's an exceeding in arsenic in a particular state, in a particular region, or in a particular public water system. This is the way to go. And again, the links to get to that are in our previous webinar. If we want to go into it today, I can definitely show it again, but just a reminder that we do have that tool. Again, this is just the data from our fiscal 17 SIDWA's data pool. And what this pie chart has up here, let me see, there we go, are our community water systems with a health-based violation. A health-based violation is those violations that are linked to an exceedance of something. So either an E. coli positive, a higher level of arsenic than what we regulate. And so for the most part, you'll see that the health-based violations are found in the small systems, or systems serving less than 500. So over half of them, of the health-based violations that we have in our system, are associated with the 500. As you start growing in size, systems serving 10,000 to 100,000, they represented about 7% of the violations that we had. And here's the percentage of community water systems with a health-based violation by system size. Again, serving more than 100, and this is, here what we did was we took the 100,000 and put them all together, and that's about 4.4%. And again, we did kind of cover this a little bit last time, but here's the number of systems that we have per size category as well. Again, this is looking at all our health-based based violations by rule family, and by far, most recently, stage 2, or disinfect and disinfection by products, is where we have the majority of our violations here in red. This particular regulation goes to when you disinfect your water and it reacts with organic material, it forms disinfection byproducts in the distribution system. And so this is where we're seeing the majority of our violations. This is mostly due to the fact that we have a lot of systems that purchase water. And so it makes sense that they're the ones getting the majority of the disinfection byproducts. This is just a quick oversight slide. A lot of people ask me, well, how is it that EPA provides oversight of the drinking water program at the state level? We do annual drinking water program reviews, which is when we go into the state and we have a sit down and we look at all their documents. And so an annual drinking water program review report is actually issued. We do file reviews, and that is when we go in and we audit the data of the primacy agency. So we actually go into their files per National Primary Drinking Water Regulation, and we look at the laboratory reports and the data that was provided to the state and to SIDWA, our federal database. And so that's a very detailed one. I would say that's when we really look at, for example, if we're looking at the lead and copper rule, we look at how the ALEs were handled, how were the public education done, how was the consumer notifications done, did they do them on time, did it have all the required elements in it, that kind of thing. We also have subject-specific implementation analysis, and we call those AKA deep dives. And that's when we pick a specific area, and we look into that area, and we determine if there's some best practices to share across the country. And then, of course, we still review primacy applications, and that is every time there is a new regulation, EPA has to work with the state to establish their primacy authority. And again, we just did that with the revised total call form rule. So here's kind of our elements in terms of providing oversight to the state drinking water program. We covered this a little bit in the first one, but again, we do a lot of training. And so if you're ever interested in any of these, please go ahead and look at our website. We have different training webinars from how to implement a rule, how to build capacity, specific small systems webinars. Last year, we hosted 89 training sessions, and over 17,000 attended. So again, if there's anything you're really interested in, we probably are doing a webinar on it. Small system challenges. We talked a little bit about how small systems face bigger challenges in implementing regulations. And what I wanted to show you in this graph right here on the right is So these are the very small, medium, large, and very large. And so this is the annual operating cost per capita. And as you can see, a very small system has a much larger per capita than a very large, and that's because they serve less people. But they're treating for a lot of the contaminants. And so here you have an economy of scales in these larger systems, so they can spread it over their customer base. Most of them have many certified engineers and certified operators, and so they're able to effectively run those treatment systems. And so this is kind of a big deal where EPA tries to work with these small systems to say, how can we, enhance your technical knowledge, but also see how we can enhance your financial capacity and your management capacity to make sure that your rate structures are adequate, that you are providing funds not only to cover your operations, but also your future infrastructure investments. So this is called the capacity development under SIDWA 1420. Each state has to establish a capacity development and operator certification program. If not, we actually withhold 20% of their annual drinking water state revolving fund. So that's a big deal. So far, all the states are implementing the program. We have conditioned the grant in the past, but most of them do not want the 20% to be withheld. So they really are motivated to have effective operator and capacity development programs. Again, SIDWA understood that it wasn't just about monitoring those contaminants, but how do we enhance TMF, or technical managerial capacity? How do we use their state revolving funds to not only fund capacity, but also fund infrastructure? And so through the SRF, there are set-asides to help with operator certification, workforce development, asset management, and enhancing capacity of these systems. Again, if you're interested in some of the building capacity systems, we have a lot of these tools on our website. We have MOAs with Veterans Affairs to try to get veterans into our workforce. We have fact sheets about how capacity development and operator certification work together. We have analysis of our drinking water state revolving fund aside, so you can see how the states are building capacity of drinking water systems. And we also worked with USDA to make sure that we are promoting local decision makers' best practices. One of the biggest challenges is in local communities. They want to win the election, and so a lot of them run on platforms about not raising rates, or not really investing in the drinking water. And so that's really where you're having huge catastrophe issues, because you have deferred maintenance for 25 years, and so when you go back to them, your system could be in really big trouble. So we work on those documents as well. We just launched a interactive water system partnership website, and what that does is it has examples across the country of how states are facilitating partnerships, whether it be operator sharing, informal partnerships. They're purchasing water from each other, or they're contracting out operation management of the systems to help them be more effective. This often happens in parts of the country where they don't either have the funds or the capacity to keep some of these functioning aspects of the system, and so they seek help from each other to make it happen. So let's go in a little bit into the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Since 1996, we have appropriated $18 billion and leveraged over $32 billion in loans for a total of 12,800 projects. For the most part, these investments, 39% have gone to transmission and distribution lines, which makes sense. We're not building huge treatment plants, but we are extending those lines. 39% went to treatment, so just enhancing utilities. 10% went to storage. 5.8 went to source, and 5.7 went to some type of other project. Again, these are some of our statistics for the State Revolving Fund. So far, we've been able to be appropriated $35.4 billion. The state's leveraged EPA's $19 billion into projects over the last 20 years. Over 14,000 loans since '97. All 50 states and Puerto Rico have drinking water state revolving funds. Who is eligible, and we've talked a little bit about this before, basically community water systems and nonprofit, non-community water systems. We can have great loan terms. It could be up to 20 years, and it could be up to 30 years for disadvantaged communities. Repayments begin 1 year after the project. We know that one. And then for every $1 from the federal government, $1.87 has gone to help communities. So those are kind of some of our statistics of our Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Real quick, this might look like a very complicated diagram, but basically all it means is EPA has an allocation formula. Congress actually gives us the level of the state revolving fund. We use a capitalization formula to allocate it to the states. EPA does not give out funds to each state. What we do is we give out an allocation number, but the state directly gets the funds from the Department of Treasury. So there is not an exchange of funds, but a level of funding that we will determine, but the check itself is made by the Department of Treasury. SRF allotments are basically based on our needs survey. And so the Safe Drinking Water Act mandates that we conduct an assessment of drinking water infrastructure need every 4 years. We did it in 95, 99, 2003, 07, 11, and 15. And basically what that does is it looks at the state's needs, and then it creates an allotment formula. And then that allotment formula is ran, and that is how much funding each state gets. The survey is designed to achieve statistical analysis at state levels where all systems are above 100,000 people. There is a statistical sample for systems serving 33 to 100, and then we do site visits to about 600 systems serving 25 to 3,300 people. The next report should be coming out soon. It's currently under OMB review. One of the important things about the SRF is that it has not only the part that is the infrastructure part where it helps, more of that building, the treatment plant, the storage, but we also have set-asides. And these set-asides are used to help systems build their capacity. Again, we talked about it's not just about infrastructure, but also how you build the capacity of those systems, in terms of technical, managerial, and financial capacity. So 2% of the state's SRF can be used to provide technical assistance to small water systems. 4% can be used for the administration of the SRF program as well as technical assistance to water systems. 10% can be to administer the PWSS program, the Source Water Protection Program, the Capacity Development Program, and the Operator Certification Program. So the SRF can fund that. And then there's a 15% set aside that can fund land acquisition and conservation easements for source water protection. Loans to implement a voluntary source water protection measure, assistance for capacity development strategy, as well as the wellhead protection program. So with that said, our programs are basically designed to all work together, but they're all basically a public health program. So it's funding to protect public health. And it's kind of how we like to show all our different programs, as well as the different types of funding mechanisms that we have for them. And with that said, my last slide was going to be the UIC program primacy map. Again, we had some questions about that. Each state has different primacy per well. So as you can tell here, primacy well class 2 only is for Alaska, California, all the states in red. The states in green have primacy for class 1 through 5. And EPA implements in the blue states, which is 1 through 5. So really, depending where in the country you're having UIC questions, is where we would divert your, the questions and the right agencies to.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. We're at 4, but why don't we take a few questions just before people start getting off, for those of you who can stay on. If you have to go, I understand you're at 4, and thank you so muis joining us. Maria, do you mind staying on for a few questions?
No, not a problem.
Okay, perfect. So first question is, how frequently is EPA doing the deep dives into the state programs, and what triggers those? Is there anything that community members and NGOs can do to trigger a review of a particular aspect of a state drinking water program?
Sure. The deep dives, actually, we're just about to start the consecutive system deep dive with the states, and that's because of that. You saw how many stage 2 violations we had, and that's usually due to our consecutive systems. And so we got that from our file reviews, from our state audits, and from the systems also having challenges with it. If one of our, and we actually reached out to a lot of our stakeholders like American Water Works Association, NRWA, RCAP, those are kind of some of the stakeholders that we traditionally have worked with, and they also say, yeah, you're having a lot of issues with this. So right now, that's the one that we picked. The deep dives are not part of SIDWA, so there's not this very strict timing on it, but we're also, we're constantly looking for advice from it. So you reach out to any of us, we'll be glad to talk to you and get advice, or hear you out. What are some of the things that we should be looking at?
Okay, great. 2 questions on the drinking water, on the funding mechanism. So I'm going to give you both, and you decide which, or if you want to tackle both, or one or just the other. So one is on the eligibility for what sort of projects can be funded. And so we know that the drinking water SRF will fund sort of traditional, what we call gray infrastructure, the treatment pipes, treatment systems. Is there also eligibility for more natural infrastructure projects that treat and store water, what we might call green infrastructure? And we didn't have time to get into this, but is there anything just generally you can say about how the new Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, WIFIA, is different than the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund?
Yes, I guess I'll start with that. So the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, the way that one works is Congress gives us an allocation. We use the needs survey per state to do the allocation formula. Again, kind of like what I said, we don't transfer money over to the states. We basically say, this is the amount, let's say it's $1 million. It's not really that, but, state A, you have $1 million for it. We don't really hand the $1 million to the state. We basically, the state knows that they can spend $1 million, and then when the construction starts, all those invoices go to the Department of Treasury, who then pays it off. It's really a state program. We joke that we have 57 different drinking water state revolving fund projects because although EPA provides oversight, the states are able to kind of customize those programs based on the needs in the states. The utilities apply for the state and say, here's my project, this is what I want and need. The states categorize those and then they decide who they fund based on public health implications. WIFIA is very different. WIFIA is based on TIFIA, which is a transportation funding mechanism, but WIFIA is for water, of course. And basically, WIFIA turns EPA into a bank. So EPA had to do a lot of work to put the WIFIA program in place. We do get an allocation from Congress on it, and basically, it has completely different requirements on the loans. It actually is. It has a 49-51 split between private funds and government funds. SRF does not have that. SRF is a loan from the government or a grant from the government. WIFIA leverages private and public funds. And again, WIFIA turns EPA into a bank. So EPA had to establish a credit form similar to the USDA rural development. We review the programs ourselves, so it doesn't go to the state. And those projects have to be very large. They're over, I think the minimum is $20 million, whereas in SRF you could have lower, a smaller loan. And I think the $20 million is for the small systems, and I think the larger ones have to be $50 million. So we're talking about really big capital infrastructure projects. I hope that helps. And there are some WIFIA webinars if anybody's interested in having more details about that.
Okay, yeah, let's do some of that afterwards. And what about the eligibility under the Drinking Water SRF for green projects? I know there's some differences between the Clean Water SRF and the Drinking Water SRF.
Yes. Sorry. There is on the SRF website, we have a green infrastructure fact sheet, and it details what is considered a green project under SRF that is eligible for it. There are more greener projects identified under clean water than the drinking water. A lot for us have been the efficiency of pumps solar panels, but we do have a fact sheet that kind of identifies all of them. When we did a big green push, oh goodness, when did that fund come? A few years ago, we got extra funding for green projects. The clean water side had a lot more projects than we did. And a lot of ours for drinking water, again, were the pumps, solar panels, those kinds of things.
Great. Okay, we'll send that out as well. So here's the final one then before we wrap up, I think, is just how do we find out about webinars for certain topics like lead, WIFIA, capacity building? Could we get those, can I get those from links from you and send them out to people? I presume those are open to the public?
Yeah, those were the ones that we sent the first webinar. They were in the first set of PowerPoints and we showed them, but yes, definitely.
Perfect. Okay, so we will send those out as a follow-up. All right. This is great. We've covered a lot and probably very quickly, but this is, with this much cut, we're grateful for you for getting all the way through as far as we did. Do you have any last comments to make?
I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully we have tagged this to parts of our website that you can visit to get more information. The program is quite large, so I know it's hard to cover everything in such a short amount of time. But hopefully we were able to entice your curiosity about the program and know where to go on our website to find more information. And hopefully, we will see each other in a meeting in the future.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Maria, so much for your time and putting this together and spending with us, and we'll do some follow-up. And thanks to everyone in our audience today for staying with us a little bit longer than we had planned. I hope you got a lot out of it. You will be getting a survey as we close out, so we hope you'll take that. That would really help us a lot. So again, this is Catherine Bayer at River Network, and we'll close out, but thanks to everyone for joining us and to Maria. And we will have more about drinking water coming up in the coming months and years. So thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Bye-bye.